welcome to the next episode of Hacktics and Telemetry. I am one of your co-hosts, Douglas McKee, and I am joined by the one and only CryptoCat. And we've got a special guest hosting with us this week. Jacob is one of our senior penetration testers here at Rapid7, and we're so excited to have him on this Rapid7 produced podcast. Of course, if you have enjoyed watching these podcasts in the past, please like and subscribe. Comment in the bottom. Let us know what you want to hear about, what you don't want to hear about, although it does look like that AI is here to stay. In fact, Jonah, speaking of AI, if I'm not mistaken, I think I saw someone lost a little bit of money this week by forgetting to put some guardrails around AI. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I saw something a little bit. I think it was $500 million, right?
$500 million. How does one just accidentally spend $500 million?
Yeah, so they say, I don't know. I need to see the receipts.
That's absolutely insane. If I ever accidentally spend $500 million, that's going to be a really, really bad day. Come on, we even had, in the past, what was it? Episode 1, we had Greg Richardson on talking about how to make sure you don't spend $500 million on your tokens. Come on now, people. We can do better than that. And we've had some previous guests on this podcast. I think we've even had a gentleman by the name of Yorian who came on, what was it, last episode? 2 episodes? And talked about...
2 episodes ago. Yeah.
And
he joined us for the Roundcube XSS, and he found another XSS, but this one's really interesting because it's in a tool that you use to find XSS.
Hold on. Wait, say that again? That sounded circular.
Yeah. So there's a tool called Shazza. It's made by Gareth Hayes at Portswigger. And that was, it's used for fuzzing, for general like web fuzzing. So you can find different quirks, mutated XSS, things like that. And yeah, Yorian used that he found an XSS in the tool that you use to find XSS.
That sounds like a good reason to have him back.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, we'll have to see if we can get Yorian back on to talk about his XSS inception here and talk about that at a later time. But hey, Jacob, what are your thoughts on the fact that I think the counter is pretty low on Mythos? We are getting to a point where Mythos is coming. What do you think?
Yeah, it's an interesting topic. I've kind of changed opinions over the last couple of weeks. Initially, I thought I was leaning towards this is a marketing stunt. You know, the name, the etymology of the word mythos is a tale in Greek. So like, they've spun up quite a nice tale here that sells their product in a favorable way. But I've been playing around more myself with building agentic red team architectures, and if you give it the right guidance, these can become very powerful very quick. So I have no doubt that companies like Anthropic will have very capable models sitting ready to turn loose. So I'm looking forward to seeing what happens.
What I took away from that is that we have a Greek mythology expert now on the podcast for the regular. So that sounds like it's going to be a great add-in for...
He can come in every time they have a new model name out.
Yeah,
there we go. We'll get the background of all the model names as they continue.
Played around with this as well. I was playing around with Opus 4.8. I didn't find any bugs with it. I quickly went back to 4.6. I feel like I'm just going to be stuck on 4.6 now until Mythos comes out. And then, I don't know, I guess there's going to be a race and like a lot of duplicate bugs.
I don't know. You remember like, I don't think it's as prevalent these days, but you remember like the old, when iPhone came out and was super popular and stuff, like there was this huge thing about don't update to the latest because there was always many ridiculous bugs.
I think a more recent example of that is like packages, right? You've seen all the supply chain attacks, and now people are saying actually the safest thing to do is just don't upgrade to the latest version, keep it frozen on one that's like a few months old because nobody targets those. Yeah, well,
my whole point with that was I feel like these AI models are the same way. Like every time if I upgrade or go to the newest one right when it comes out, I feel like it's worse. And if I wait like a month and then use the newest one, it's like way better than it was when it first came out. So I feel like I'm taking that approach again, once again in technology, taking the approach of not using the latest and greatest. But that could just be, me being stupid or something. But Speaking of being stupid, there's usually a lot of drama in the industry. Any drama this week that popped up on your radar before we kick this off?
Yeah, so I'm sure a lot of people will have seen there's been some drama over the Microsoft research community. And there was a researcher, Nightmare Eclipse, who dropped a lot of 0 days. I think we might have talked about them on a previous podcast. And yeah, a bit of drama. Microsoft banned his GitHub account. And, they're getting like law enforcement involved and stuff, which has led to a lot of people in the community, like a lot of kind of big researchers talking about the experiences they've had with Microsoft over the years. And I mean, I don't want to personally, I don't have any experience with this with Microsoft. I don't want to just kind of join in with that. I know there's a lot of problems in general when it comes to responsible disclosure and bug bounties of like, fairness on both sides. But it seems to be really hyping up. I mean, Nightmare Eclipse has set a date. I can't remember what it was. Sometime in July, they set a date for a 14th. New vulnerability that's going to drop 14th of July. So yeah, we can all wait to see what happens there. I saw another researcher actually gave vulnerability to them. I think they called it Blitzkrieg, which was given the other day, and then they released that. So you're actually seeing like the research community kind of join in to support Nightmare Eclipse, and yeah, it can be interesting to see where it goes.
It couldn't really have happened at a more dangerous time, potentially, because given the vulnerability disclosure, like anyone has the capabilities now to weaponize that rapidly using artificial intelligence or whatever.
100%. I actually saw some takes as well, and obviously this is kind of just an opinion or a speculation that it might, some companies, I don't want to say specifically, but some companies might kind of think this is actually a good time to kind of drive a bit of fear into researchers because there are so many vulnerabilities being found. There are a lot of issues with huge queues and things getting disclosed outside of that. So by kind of threatening law enforcement and things like that, you can put a bit of fear into researchers not to disclose these things or not to complain when things don't go how they would consider fairly.
Yeah, it's always interesting. Microsoft's a titan in the industry. They have their MSRC program, which is fantastic. But with all the vulnerabilities that come out around Microsoft products, there's always bound to be good and bad experiences when you have anything of that large. And it's definitely a very challenging situation to be in. So, I mean, and we've seen coordinated disclosure evolve over the years, and it wasn't very well taken in the beginning. And then we had full disclosure, and we've come back on that a little bit in the industry, and we do a lot more responsible disclosure, which in my opinion is good, right? That's what we do here at Rapid7. So it's definitely an evolving situation, and researchers want to be heard. They have the right to be heard, of course, but then how do you balance that also with, big companies that are trying to churn through these vulnerabilities at a given time? It's a challenge, right? I don't think there's necessarily like a black and white answer. Every scenario is definitely going to be a little bit different. But the biggest takeaway that I got out of you guys chatting there is that Jacob tried to circumvent the AI counter by saying artificial intelligence. I'm going to make sure that actually gets counted before for the counter here. We're not going to circumvent it just by spelling out the long words. But with that here, if you haven't joined us before in Hacktics and Telemetry, we generally have 3 segments. So we start with the Situation Room, which is where we could take a deep dive into the latest and greatest research and news in cybersecurity. That's usually run by Jonah. Will walk us through what's been going on lately. Then we're going to jump into the War Room, which is our guest segment. We're super excited to pull on a very special guest this week, so I can't wait to get to that. And then last but not least, I don't like to only provide you problems. I like to try to provide you solutions, and that is the purpose of the Mitigation Minute. So we'll jump on and talk about, with everything that we've learned throughout the podcast, what are some things that we could recommend for you to provide solutions to some of these problems that we've heard about and not just point out a bunch of pain points for you. With that said, Jonah, are you ready to take us to the Situation Room?
Yeah, let's go.
All right, welcome to the Situation Room. This is where we're going to go through a whole bunch of news stories and what's been relevant since the last time we had a podcast. So, Jonah, what do you got for us this week?
Let me see. I just need to...
Hold on. Is it AI related?
A little bit. Not too much. Not as much as always. Okay, so this is one from Star Labs. This is talking about their Pwn2Own attempts. Not really attempt. Unfortunately, didn't actually get to the competition to show it off. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But they targeted LiteLLM, and yeah, it's an LLM gateway.
LiteLLM's getting a lot of attention these days. They've had several big vulnerabilities that have come out, and I think it just has to do with it's a great platform. I don't know if you've leveraged it at all, Jonah, but
I haven't. No. And I know there were some successful entries from Pwn2Own on it, I believe, as well, although I haven't really seen the details of those yet. But this article is more just like talking about this race against the patch. So, this is where the AI comes in, right? Is they were developing exploits with AI, and then the vendor was patching them, and then they were very quickly diffing the patches to see if they could find bypasses, if they could find new vulnerabilities. And it ended up this race where basically, it's very quickly getting patched, very quickly finding new chains. They ended up finding 4 chains in total. And I'm going to talk about the first one mostly. So here's the thing as well, rules of engagement. The rules were changed at some stage. So it was initially, as is normally the case with Pwn2Own, it's like a default configuration. They're quite strict on that. But at some point, they changed that to say that the attacker could possess a standard internal key. So the first chain was done under the assumption that that wasn't the case, that it needs to be unauthenticated. And yeah, here's the 4 versions they did the chains on. You can see behind every update lies a tear-jerking history of find a bug, craft the exploit chain, and then get instantly patched by the vendor, and it just repeats over and over again.
So is that an argument to hold your bugs till after Pwn2Own?
I don't know. Well, they hadn't disclosed the bugs, right? So at this stage, they have the chain. Even if they hold them, they're patched. So it's like,
so you're saying the vendor found them as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Patched them without them being reported. Yep. Oh, okay. That's definitely more interesting.
So there was a little bit of that. I think there was also some issues along here with the bugs getting disclosed, because obviously some people didn't get to go to Pwn2Own, so some bugs got disclosed early, and I think that might have also impacted one of the changes as well. I can't quite remember, so we'll see that as we go
they
through.
were saying they were able to find some unauthenticated exploits as well, but it wasn't in scope for the competition.
That might be... So normally you do need an auth bypass. Normally you need auth bypass and you need RCE, so it should be from... But maybe that's after they said that you can use that internal key then.
Mm-hmm.
So the first bug was interesting. This is, they said here, the entire auth builder is wrapped so that any exception is routed back to a fallback handler. And there is an exception. If you trace this through, there's an exception which will arrive down here, and it says, if allow requests on DB unavailable equals true, then it's going to grant admin access with no key validation at all. So all you need to do is DOS the database while this is starting up, and then you'll have admin access. So they know what they need to do now. They need to find a DOS vulnerability. And in doing that...
typically one of the easier ones to find. Like when
and one of the less attractive ones. Yeah, they're kind of looked down on a little bit. You see, particularly in bug bounty, a DOS is quite often out of scope. I guess with like some binary stuff, it's probably a little bit more important. But how did they do this anyway? So they basically were able to make just loads of connections. This Prisma pool defaults to 10 connections, 60-second timeout. There's no rate limit on the auth. So they could just flood connections. And
if I'm reading this right, it looks like they told Opus to find these bugs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I don't know which part it was, but at one point, there's a patch release, they diff the patch, then they say like within 2 minutes or 1 or 2 minutes later, we had a new exploit chain. So yeah, they're talking about the race here, but that really kind of puts it in perspective. So yeah, this is how they did it anyway. They flood these various endpoints. It takes a while for this pool timeout and connection error, which basically DOSes the database. So they're able to get past that first part. They get authenticated, and then the next part is just an SSTI. So there's this Ginger 2 via the prompt/test endpoint, and I believe there might have been some filters on this. Or no, I think actually the filter, this A, is only filtering to prevent cross-site scripting, so it doesn't actually impact like for the SSTI injection. So payload is fairly simple here. They are, just standard kind of SSTI payload to access like the internals and the globals, and then they can execute commands. And that isn't where it stopped, actually. There was also a sandbox escape. So once they got authenticated and code execution, they also found there was some issue with the deny list, and they were able to call certain Python built-ins or Python globals, which allowed them to escape the sandbox as well. So that's it, ready for Pwn2Own, right?
That's what it sounds like. So did they publish here that they used Opus from top to bottom? I'd be curious.
Yes, I'm pretty sure they did. They did say that.
AI integration here.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, there's always going to be a lot of research or integration, right? These guys at Star Labs, before the invention of AI, they were already producing crazy chains. So I don't doubt that they wouldn't be able to find this themselves, but in terms of like accelerating some of this stuff, and you need to, right? If you need to, like, if a chain's getting patched every week or every 2 weeks, you need to be very fast in finding the new exploits and, making sure that they're reliable. So how did this end anyway? They discovered the 3 vulnerabilities, didn't last for long. Bug 3 was made public by another research team in their blog. So that's what we were saying there, Doug. Actually, some other disclosures can also impact this. Shortly after that, Bug 2 was patched. And then more importantly later...
We've got some experience with that here at Rapid 7 too, where, we've submitted bugs and, we've submitted some bugs recently and found out that other researchers have also submitted those bugs, which is also a byproduct of leveraging all these models as well.
Exactly. And this is going to be a big change, right? Like research projects, whether it's Pwn2Own or just like general research projects, you'd often like say, okay, we've got 3 to 6 months to find all these vulnerabilities. But if you just have so many researchers using AI and they're finding these bugs, you don't necessarily, if you can find a bug in 1 or 2 days, another researcher can find it in that time. You don't necessarily have months to wait to disclose things anymore.
Well, it's even, if you pull that thread a little bit further, it's even interesting. I know some guys that have never done vulnerability research that all of a sudden are submitting bugs because they're offloading a majority of it to AI. Yep. And that's not a bad thing, right? Like we want bugs reported, we want bugs patched. I'm not saying that negatively, but the barrier to entry is definitely a lot lower than it used to be. So that's contributing to bug collisions as well.
100%, yeah.
How fast do you think researchers can find these things now? Should the likes of Pwn2Own be moved to like a on the day event where researchers are targeting a pre-release version?
Personally, I think there has to be some kind of freeze. Like I was surprised even before AI that this was a thing, because even before people using AI, you were hearing people who are like, oh, they get on the plane to go to Pwn2Own and they see the vendor has patched their bugs. And it's like, there should be some kind of cutoff. It shouldn't get to the point where people fly halfway across the world. They get there and it's like, oh, your bug's been patched yesterday. I feel like that was a little bit unfair as it was.
I totally agree. I always wondered why, like, there should be, like, if it was patched in the last 24 hours and you can show it worked on the previous version, it should still be valid, right? Or the past 40 hours, whatever that window should be. Because to your point, up until the world of AI, like, people were putting months and months of time into these bugs, and then they get patched out like 2 days before. I mean, again, that's sort of what we want, right? We want them patched, but in the spirit of the competition, that's a little disrespectful to the researchers' time, in my opinion.
I think so. Jacob mentioned there the out of scope. Yes, that was what we were talking about a minute ago. Is they later changed that you would have allow requests on DB unavailable to true, meaning that the authentication bypass fell out of scope. So that first actual DOS they wouldn't be able to use. Ultimately they need to go and find a new chain. And here is the vulnerabilities that were fixed: 1, 2, and 3, all fixed. So they go to the next version. Let me see here. Do they mention using AI for it? Yeah, with Opus. So they found this. This was a premium gate bypass in the key/generate endpoint. They found it when they were auditing the previous patch, which had the fix for the SSTI in it with Opus. And essentially what this was, let me try and remember this one. The allowed pass-through routes controls endpoints which can go through. There was a top-level field which has this premium check, but you can basically nest those inside. So I think it's probably easiest to look at the payload here. You can basically nest, or hang on a second, actually. I think I've skipped an important part of it. Yeah, another part of it was that that's down here, the prefix matching. Okay. So basically, they're able to make this request because they're able to embed it inside. They're able to nest it inside of this JSON object to kind of bypass that first filter. And that means they can make requests which go through as a premium list. So, the same blind spot applies. This is a POC. A single request from a low-privileged internal user smuggles enterprise-only key field through. And there is also a bug with the prefix matching. So in this case, they put through /user. But basically, anything after /user will be valid. So in this case, if they put /team, they can also do /team/new /team member add member delete.
So my understanding is correctly, they're leveraging paid features through the free interface effect. Like you said, enterprise versus user, they're leveraging a different code path completely that they're not supposed to be accessing through the standard path. Is that what you're saying?
Premium gate bypass. I guess that's how I would understand this. Yeah. It has a premium check. So yeah, I guess so. Maybe just for the paid feature of LiteLLM.
Yeah.
They were basically able to use this anyway as privilege escalation. So in the same spirit as that we mentioned with the prefix matching, if they can put in /invitation, they can also do invitation new, user update, etc. They use this to access the user update field or endpoint, which can set a user role. So you can basically just set a user of your choice to be proxy admin in this case. And once they get access as the admin, they got RCE by creating an MCP stdio server. And I think that just basically gave them RCE. From what I understand, they were able to just put in their Python command here. So another chain, and it didn't last for long. Let me see
here. That's insane as well. It's like if they get RCE on that server that's handling all of the pass-through from a customer or customer's LLM proxying, like the damage they could do there in terms of routing it to their own malicious servers.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so much stuff going through LLMs now. I've played some CTFs that use LLMs, and some of them, like, it's, leaking stuff from prompts, but other ones, it's like quite complex setups where you have, different APIs that the LLM can use, and they've put like a lot of protections on, that you would need to bypass to get it to make those API calls. So, some crazy ones. In fact, did anybody see the Instagram one there? I think was this yesterday or today, the Instagram news? Should have covered this one in the intro, but I saw this. So basically, they had a feature that they were rolling out, but they were only doing it for like selective accounts. They were doing like a rollout. They test it on a small segment of accounts. It wasn't mine that they tested it on. Otherwise, maybe I would have got to report this bug. But basically, there was a bug in the LLM chat in it where you could just reset, I think you could just reset another user's password just by providing their username, or there was some way to take over their account just by providing any username. Maybe are you looking that up, Doug?
I'm trying to. I'm not being very successful. I'm Googling the wrong thing, apparently.
Crazy.
I think I might have just seen it this morning. So anyway, that's 2 chains down. Let me see. Chain 3, they quickly patched bug 3. So they moved on to the 3rd chain. They're able to still use bug 1 and bug 2. So it just moves straight onto this onboarding get token. Let me try and skip through this a little bit because we've got quite a lot to cover. So this will allow a team admin to, this is kind of similar to the last one. They can do the invite new. Team admin can invite any user who shares a team with them, even proxy admin. So using bug 1 and bug 2, they create a team. They add the default user ID, which is the proxy admin created on the initial setup, the initial access, and the invitation condition is met. So the result is they use bug 1 and bug 2 with the 2 newly discovered vulnerabilities and successfully achieve RCE again. Short-lived. Be interesting to look, they didn't mention here, but it'd be interesting to look how long this chain lasted before the new PR came out.
It'd be interesting to see that for all of them. Like, what was the time from the time that they found it versus the time that the fix was put in? As you said, it was kind of a race to the finish there. I think I found the Instagram thing. It says people are using prompt injection to trick Meta's AI into handling over Instagram accounts. Is that the one you're talking about?
That sounds right. Yep.
Yeah, that released today. And it says an attacker uses a VPN matching the target account location. And then the attacker sends a message saying something like, just link my new email address. This is my username. I'll send you a code to the AI assistant, right? Because it's just an AI assistant on thing. And the AI then happily sends a password reset link to the attacker's email address, and they can get into your account. So that, I mean, classic prompt injection, I suppose, right? Like getting the LLM to do something it's not supposed to do solely based on VPN connection. That's pretty neat, actually.
It's a good job that was a limited rollout as well.
Yeah, it doesn't say that on the article I'm looking at, but if that's what you saw somewhere else.
Yeah, I did see that. I'm assuming if it wasn't, there'd probably be quite a bit of impact from that now, right?
I would think so.
Anyway, we got 3 chains down. The 4th chain was something to do with the environment secrets. So they mentioned that there was one path which successfully prevented the OS environment secret being added. Where was it? I know there was 2 branches on this one. There was basically a branch which would successfully block the sensitive keys that environment variables and stuff being shown. And there was one that wouldn't. And then they were able to use this Langfuse tunnel to basically, which is supposed to pass telemetry to a login backend. They were able to use that to leak out the OS environment variable and basically get back that like master key. And for the RCE, maybe that was all that was needed, was it? Because they have full access. I think so, yeah. So they're talking about the other fix. They said, actually, this one surprised us slightly because they patched a semantically nearly identical issue just 2 weeks earlier, and they missed this one. So that's the 4 chains. I think the summary of this is really painful because they said, they got the 4th one working. However, Berry AI quickly patched the vulnerability, as they always do. So all 4 chains are broken. And at the same time as they realized that bug had been patched, they also found that their Pwn2Own entry was rejected due to the high number of participants. So even if it would have worked, they wouldn't have been able to show it. However, the twist on that was, as the competition happened, they found out that they actually used an older version of LiteLLM in Pwn2Own, which would have been vulnerable to the final chain. So in the end, they did have a working full chain that would have got them the prize if they successfily demonstrated it at Pwn2Own.
Which they weren't allowed to participate in.
Which they weren't allowed to participate in. Which means because somebody else might have got a spot who didn't get to successfully demonstrate the exploit, right? That's the most painful part of this. Imagine if you have a working chain for LiteLLM and a team who says they've got a working chain as well, they get accepted, they go to the competition, they don't demonstrate it, or like something happens before the event, and then the team that did have it, they're like still in Singapore, unable to do the exploits.
Brutal.
Yeah. So I think a nice graph
is appropriate.
Exactly. Yeah, I like this. Anyway, there's a video here which just shows the exploit as well. Pretty simple. They run their POC, they get a shell back, and full timeline actually at the bottom. So they do actually have this to say what stage each thing was patched at. So 17th of March, we've got 19th of March. It doesn't actually show the time that was killed. But yeah, hopefully this is gonna improve in future, because Star Labs normally have some really cool, I think they probably did have some other stuff actually at the competition. I can't quite remember because there's a lot of entries.
I don't remember exactly what all ended up at the competition and not. But you know what's interesting? This article we're talking about here about patch cycles. In other words, exploit fixed, find exploit, exploit fixed, find a new one. We have some other research to talk about where that race to patch was not a problem, right? Where so not everything is being fixed by LLMs as fast as they could be in some cases. So Jonah, what vulnerabilities have we seen recently that aren't being patched?
Let me find this other article.
Oh wait, hold on. I recognize that. Who wrote this one, Jonah?
Yeah, this is one from me. So this is a vulnerability that I found in GOGS, which is like a self-hosted version of Git, an open source self-hosted version of Git. And yeah, it's an argument injection in the rebase before merge operation, which is not patched. It's still unpatched. We released this on, well, I'll go through the timeline towards the end actually. But yeah, we released it. I submitted a pull request with a patch in it. Hopefully that will get accepted. If not, maybe the maintainers can put their own patch. You know, they probably know the software better than I do. So I hoped that they would do it and just ask for my input if needed. But seeing as nobody was creating a patch, I thought I should just go and put something there.
Well, I'll only call on that really quick because I talk to researchers about this all the time. I think absolutely right. There's a good chance the developers know the software better than you do as a researcher because they created the software. But I also think there's a point to be made that oftentimes, and maybe this isn't as true because now we're leveraging AI so much to determine these vulnerabilities, but it's definitely been true in the past where if a researcher has put in the time it takes to discover a vulnerability, they often understand the problem and the mitigation better than the developer itself. I've said this for years now. If you're doing coordinated disclosure and you're putting in a document to the vendor, whether that's open source or closed source, your opinion of how to fix that is extremely valuable. And I still hold that true today, even with AI. Even if you're using AI to help you determine what the mitigation is that you should be suggesting to them, you can get bugs faster if you take the time because you might have a better and deeper understanding of the vulnerability and the system than the developer himself because you've worked at it from a different angle. Reverse engineering just gives you a different perspective than writing the code itself. So I still think Doug's opinion, extremely high value in putting those mitigation suggestions together. And in this case, for you, Jonah, you did that in a PR request. So
yeah, absolutely. I did give a suggested fix in the initial ticket, like nearly 3 months ago or something. But so to clarify there, I think the fix is fine. It'll secure it in the way that it should. My hesitation would be that maybe there's some other part of GOGS that I don't, maybe it has an impact somewhere else that I don't know about that might not introduce a security issue, but just might like break something along the lines. Even part of it is just not having a hyphen at the start of the branch name. But if you've allowed that in the past, are you going to break a load of legacy systems? You're going to have loads of universities, suddenly people's university projects they can no longer use because GOGS is updated. I don't know. Probably not, but just I'd rather it not be my responsibility.
Well, of course. And that's why that collaboration is so important, right? That's why you want to work with the developer. I just want to impress upon the importance of security researchers providing a suggestion for how to mitigate some of these issues.
Yeah. Anyway, so a little bit more about the vulnerability. So it does require authentication, but the way this typically works is a bit like GitHub or GitLab, right? You go and register an account. You can normally just register an account, sign in, and create your own repos, create private repos, things like that. That's not always going to be the case because it's self-hosted. So if you have a university, if you have like a small to medium-sized company, you might just say, okay, well, I'm only going to allow like a certain email address, like at mycompanyname.com to sign up, or I'm just going to restrict it, and I'm going to, whenever somebody joins the company, joins the university, I'm going to make them an account, and that's the only way they can get in. So there's some caveats to that. But in general, the default is registration is enabled, and you can also create your own repos. So unless that has been reconfigured, then it's going to be vulnerable.
But not only that, when you're talking about from an internal asset, like something like GOGS, if you figure if threat actors already got in your organization, they probably got in and have some valid email address that they know how to leverage to either create that account in your one scenario, or they've got credentials from lateral movement or something. So it's not far-fetched at all in these scenarios to have credentials. Or to your point, what's even easier in this scenario is you can oftentimes create your own because registration is going to be wide open.
Absolutely. And even if you can create your own account but can't create your own repos, or as you say, gain access to some credentials, but you can't create your own repos, it does also work if you have collaboration to another repo. So somebody else has their own repo, they invite you as a collaborator, and you're able to do this merge, then it's still going to be vulnerable as well. And the impact of this is pretty crazy because it gives you a shell as the GOGS user. So GOGS although you have multiple repositories, think about university, you might have thousands of repos for all the students. GOGS has access to all of those. GOGS is the owner of those folders. So it can read the repos, including private repos. It can dump credentials like password hashes, SSH keys, things like that. It can pivot to other systems, as we were kind of talking about there. And it can modify any hosted repo's code. So we talk about like supply chain attacks. It's not going to be as big a thing here, right? Because it's like a self-hosted version. But if this was on GitHub, if this was on GitLab, then and you could go and silently modify the code of any repo. You can imagine the potential impact if they don't have enough like mitigations to prevent. I mean, I know there's like commit sign-in and stuff, so maybe they would just catch it early enough that it wouldn't really have a big impact, but the potential's there. And yeah, a little bit about what it is. I already said it's self-hosted Git service. It has around 50,000 stars on GitHub and over 5,000 forks, so it is quite popular. And if you search it on Shodan with this query, there's at the time of writing, there was 1,141 instances, but I did see other research from like previous researchers that had used some other tools to, rather than Shodan, to check this. I think they got like 2,500 that were exposed to the internet. And bearing in mind, most won't be, because most of them are going to be like VPN only or just fully internal, you know?
It's actually, in my opinion, it's pretty crazy that you have that many exposed to the internet to begin with, because you're talking about a tool that really shouldn't be exposed to the internet. I mean, if you're exposing GOGS to the internet, why are you not just using GitHub? I guess.
Well, you might not trust GitHub. You might be Nightmare Eclipse and worry that they're going to delete your repo.
You might not trust GitHub, so you're going to expose your GOGS instance to the internet because that's better trusted. I mean, I hear what you're saying, Jonah, but it's kind of an oxymoron in a sense, right? If you're not going to trust GitHub, then you're going to not have your GOGS on the internet hosted too. So
yeah,
I think there's a little bit catch-22 in that logic.
There could be some small companies or universities that like they don't have VPNs set up, they don't have like the access management that's required to allow it to be like not public. So there might be some legit cases. It's definitely not recommended. And yeah, I put all this into a Metasploit module anyway. And actually, let me,
as we do here at Rapid 7.
Yeah, of course. I love Metasploit. So that was the first point of call is to get it into Metasploit. It works on both Windows and Linux. So there are some slight differences. I'll talk about the technical aspects of that in a minute. But yeah, it can get you a reverse shell, Meterpreter shell, or whatever kind of shell you want on Linux, on Windows. It also works on Mac, but I don't have a Mac, so I didn't actually test it. I mean, it technically works, just isn't tested. So yeah, I tested this on the latest version anyway, and also on the development branch. Both are currently vulnerable. A little bit about the merge. So the vulnerability, as I mentioned, is in the merge, but it's only when it's on this rebase before merging strategy. And basically, a standard merge is just going to create the merge commit before joining two branch histories, whereas the rebase before merge is going to replay the head branch's commits on top of the base branch to produce a linear history. So this actually means that it will also, it's probably explained later in the article, but if you have a lot of commits on there, it's also going to replay each of those commits and it's going to run the command execution each time. So if you have 100 commits and you do this, you're going to have 100 shell callbacks. So just something to watch out for as well. And yeah, this isn't a default setting, but it's exposed per repo. So as long as you can create a repo, you are inherently the administrator of that repo. You can do whatever you want with it. You don't even have to make it public. So you keep it private. You do the exploit and then you delete the repo. It all happens automatically through the Metasploit module. So there's no kind of like artifacts left on the GOGS server at that stage. Although there are some kind of things we can look out for in logs, which I'll talk about later as well. And the root cause. So yeah, it's basically the PR's base branch is passed directly to Git rebranch without the -- separator, which will signal the end of options, which means that we can inject our own options in at that point. There are some other similar vulnerabilities which have occurred at various parts of this pipeline, which I think I'll show some of the past CVEs later as well. Crafting the payload. So how do we make the payload? Well, the branch name, luckily for us, a Git branch name can legally contain some of these special characters. So $, curly brace, equals, and a dash, which means we can do this like -- exec equals. And then we put in the command and we just need to replace spaces with that $, IFS in between curly braces, which will, replace that. And that'll work on Linux. For Windows, we need to do something slightly different. Let me see here. So we can't use any of these characters, which means URLs are going to be impossible. But what we can do is just base64 encode the payload, and then we just pass it to base64 decode.
Classic.
And But we can't do that on Windows. This was the thing I was thinking about here. So on Windows, unfortunately, we can't put the pipe character in a file name. So the way to get around this, and I thought this was pretty cool actually, is we basically put the payload in a file and then we commit that file to the repo. So the payload, it doesn't matter what special characters are in it because it's not actually being put in the branch name during the command injection. The branch name will literally just like call shell and then the file name that's been committed to the repo. And yeah, that's it. Just one other small thing there is that the way the shell works, it will mangle some characters. So we actually pass the committed payload file to command.exe with this //c, which will deal with that escaping. But yeah, the Metasploit module takes care of all that. You don't need to worry about it during the
Nice one.
exploitation. And yeah, I mentioned then a previous relationship to some other vulnerabilities. You can see here some CVEs 2024, also one 2026. Which were very similar. You had argument injection in release tags, argument injection during changes and previews, release tag injection in deletion, argument injection in the built-in SSH server. So yeah, yet another argument injection to add on to the list. And this is the Metasploit module. So yeah, you can do it in your own repo. You can do it on an existing repo. This screenshot's actually a little bit out of date. We're going to get this one updated because this error here with the cleanup timed out won't come up. As long as you're doing this on your own repo, it's going to fully clean up the repo on the system. But there's a short video of this running on Windows here as well. I'll let people.
It's always great to have a clean exploit, right? Like so that in Metasploit, using the Metasploit module makes this so simple. There's a lot of steps involved here, but handling those steps and doing that cleanup is fantastic.
Yeah, there's actually a little bit more cleanup that you could do. I don't know where I'm still thinking whether to add some more to the exploit because it would technically be post-exploitation steps, but if you do this on a repo which isn't your own, it will corrupt the repo. I should have mentioned that earlier. It will corrupt the repo. So if you do it on your own, it's fine. You just delete it, you do a new one. But if you do it on somebody else's repo, that's going to cause problems. But once you have the shell, you can basically go in and fix that. So it is possible to add that to the Metasploit module. Or I think what typically we would just allow people, people know that once they're authenticated now, they need to go and do some of that cleanup themselves. So not too sure if it will be fully integrated. But yeah, these are some of the IOCs.
I'll tell you what, hey, Jonah, let's move the IOC stuff. That sounds perfect for things to talk in the mitigation minute here. Now you've explained.
Oh yeah, true. Let me go down to the timeline.
Really works. Yeah, let's talk about the timeline.
So I found this on the 16th of March, 2026, and a little bit of background about this. So I was just basically starting to set up Copilot. I'd never really used Copilot before. I'd used like ChatGPT and like a bit of Claude Code in the browser, but I hadn't been using Copilot. And I wanted to set it up and test out to see how Copilot did at finding vulnerabilities. And so I built a bit of kind of a framework. And to talk a little bit about that, that's a lot of just like gathering information from past CVEs, building a threat model from those CVEs, giving it access to information that it can use as it's looking for the vulnerabilities. And I wanted to test it on something small. I didn't want to test this on like a real 0-day top project target because I wanted to tune it first. I wanted to make sure it works. And if it didn't, it's right.
Every project's a real 0-day target project. Come on now.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was. Let's call it a practice anyway. It wasn't a month-long project. It was more just like, okay, let's just see if this works, and then if it doesn't, because it might just have some bugs, right? You might just run it, and it's like, oh, this like script doesn't do anything, or oh, I'm stuck at this, but whatever. So I basically I just thought, well, let's download an open source repo. That's the best way to kind of test this out. I pointed it at GOGS. I specifically was looking for RCE, so I didn't actually look for any other vulnerabilities, and I think it was like within 1 or 2 hours I found this vulnerability then with GOGS. And I reported it the next day, 17th of March. And yeah, this is the security advisory. I didn't get any word back until the 28th of March. And one of the maintainers basically said, look, I need to find some time to look at this. Let me know. I don't know. He just said, I need to find some time to take a look at this before we can accept it. And then I said, listen, that's fine. Let me know if there's anything I can help you with in the meantime. I'd already kind of given the information that, Rapid7's disclosure policy is 60 days. We extend it to 90 days on request. Sometimes it goes over that, but as long as there's some communication there. But anyway, I didn't hear back. I contacted again, over 3 weeks later for an update. Again, didn't hear back. So I contacted again on the 6th of May and just advised, listen, we were going to go with this disclosure date. You've not asked for any extension. Do you need an extension? Do you need any help with anything? Do you need any help patching the bug? Didn't hear anything back. So we just gave a final warning on the 20th of May to say, listen, this is going to go out then on the 28th of May. is there anything we can help you with in the meantime? And we didn't hear anything back. So yeah, that's it. It went out on the 28th of May. I submitted a pull request after that with a fix in it. So that's still open. And hopefully, I mean, the thing is, I can see like commits going onto the repo pretty much every day of like fixing like small things, like small chores. And I'm like, this is kind of a bigger thing to sort, and you don't even need to do it yourself. You just need to merge the pull request, right? So yeah, I mean, I think we've done everything we can, Doug, on our side to try and make this go smoothly, to try and work with the maintainer. I'm obviously quite aware that with all the AI vulnerability discoveries, that a lot of particularly open source maintainers are overwhelmed. So we're obviously mindful of that, and we'll work with vendors if they need more time. But at some stage, it becomes irresponsible, in my opinion, to not disclose, right? Like,
yeah, that's not just your opinion, right? That's the way we look at things here at Rapid7. So we try to work with every single vendor. We try to work with every single open source maintainer or anybody that we find code in. And we try to find what is that reasonable ground, right? Understanding that you're underwater, and what we need communication in order to do that. And as you're stating, if we're not getting any communication, or if it's been a long time that we've had something open around a vulnerability, it is at some point irresponsible not to tell the general public. And the reason we look at it from that perspective is defenders need the information to protect their networks, and they can't defend against things they don't know exists, right? And so even if there is no patch for vulnerability, you can put in mitigating measures in place. In fact, we'll talk about that here in the upcoming segment to help prepare you for vulnerability if you know you're vulnerable. But if you don't know you're vulnerable, you're not going to prioritize that appropriately, and you're not going to take those steps. So that's why it's really important to have that balance between, yes, coordinated disclosure, yes, working with the vendor, but at some point it does need to be made known to the public so that they can prepare themselves, because an attacker's not going to wait. Threat actors aren't going to wait for disclosure timeline. As soon as they find something, they're going to leverage it. And as you illustrated with like the Starlink stuff that we talked about earlier, there's this huge race now for finding vulnerabilities, finding vulnerabilities. And if we don't do our part to try to help with those issues, then the threat actors are always going to have that advantage. But hey, great segment here.
One more thing, Doug, actually, I just wanted to bring up as well. And let me just share my screen quickly, because another thing that kind of factored into the decision here was previous responses to research around GOGS. So like we looked and we saw that Wiz had a disclosure from last year. It was an RCE in GOGS, and it was like, I think 6 weeks after they publicly disclosed it that GOGS ended up releasing the patch. And then if you look at this one from Sonar Source, which was 2023, the timeline is, it's painful. You have 2023, April the 20th, they report it, they ping again a week later, and it's just like asking for updates. We inform them that the 90-day disclosure has expired. So this is already like at the start of the timeline. Ask to open GitHub security advisories, ask for updates, and then they finally respond. So what stage is this? Like 2023, April, they finally respond in December. So yeah. 8 months later, they responded, say they will look into the report, which is what they said to us. And then it's again, updates. Do you have any updates? So it was over a year. It was like a year and 3 months it took for that disclosure, which is something that we can't let happen, really.
It's interesting. It demonstrates that issue that everyone's having around vulnerability queues, I guess. And like,
but this was before AI as well, 2023.
But they've always been struggling with their vuln queues, I guess.
Seems like it.
I think we're at a moment in time, and I guess we'll get into this more in the mitigation minute, but we've always been doing this like cat and mouse race between attack and defense, and it's exaggerated at the minute because of AI. But I can see some really interesting work going on within Rapid7 in the internal security teams, and I think we're maybe in a moment where we're going to shift and catch up a little bit more with like the internal security capabilities that are enhanced with AI and able to respond to these vulns quicker and patch them quicker, and hopefully we'll see the shift balance back out again a bit over the coming months.
I say it all the time, Jacob. It's funny you bring that up, the cat and mouse game between red and blue. That's definitely been something that we've been experiencing for the last decade plus, right? And I think no matter what the technology is, that's not going to change. And I do think you have these different swings, and hopefully the defenders are going to get a bit uptake here as we continue to work on the integration. But hey, guys, great segment. Great news articles to talk through this week. Let's wrap this one up and move over to the Mitigation Minute. All right, welcome to the War Room segment. This is our segment where we bring on guests from around the industry to get different opinions about what's currently going on in the threat landscape. And by the way, if you were just listening to the Situation Room, I made a silly comment that we were moving to the Mitigation Minute. That was wrong. I almost forgot that we had to do our guest segment first, but I am super excited and honored to have Olivia Rose joining us today because she is an expert on a topic that we continually try to avoid, but we always end up talking about. So we're going to let that AI counter go up pretty high as we continue to talk about AI governance. Olivia, welcome to the podcast. We wanted to give our viewers just, a few minutes about yourself and how you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me start by saying I'm no expert because I have a personal problem with people in the cybersecurity industry calling themselves experts because I really think you cannot be an expert in anything when it comes to cybersecurity or tech. Personal opinion. So
you know what?
Definitely
I like that. I like that. I think it's true. I think we could benefit in the industry from a little bit more of that. So I applaud that opinion.
A little more humility, maybe.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But I do know an awful lot about AI governance and what we're talking about today. So that I can say. Well, hi. Thank you for having me here. I am Olivia Rose. I am a former 2-time CISO and got burned out a few years ago, like so many of us do, and then went out on my own for a while, for about 3.5 years as a vCISO, and life was great. And then about a few months ago, I connected with an old acquaintance and called Kayla Williams, who is also a former CISO. And we became business partners and co-founders of Williams Rose AI Cyber Advisory, which in a nutshell provides executive services for the full arc of AI, becoming an AI first organization, from AI governance to AI road mapping and planning to the actual deployment. And of course, cybersecurity.
Well, that's fantastic. I think it's awesome to have your perspective here because we know that some CISOs watch this podcast, and I think CISO is one of the hardest job in the industry right now, especially whether AI or not AI. It's just the way that threat actors are on top of everything, and the challenges we have as defenders, combating that, the cat and mouse game that we have in the industry. I think CISOs is probably one of the hardest jobs. In fact, I'm going to start here. We mentioned this in the introduction of the podcast, and I think it's ripe for you to comment on. I don't know if you saw or not, but this was on X, Twitter. I never get it right anymore, but it was on X earlier this week. It said that an AI consultant revealed that a client accidentally, emphasis on accidentally, spent $500 million in a single month and failed to set limits when we're talking about Claude and AI. So my first question to you is, I don't have $500 million. So what do you recommend as someone that leverages AI, and Jonah does too, for vulnerability research? What do you tell your clients from a governance perspective, how to avoid spending $500 million?
Well, personally, if I had $500 million to spend, I would make sure that I had set the Claude limits. I'll be honest. But that's fair. That's a terrible, terrifying number. The idea really goes back to have a plan. And that's one of the biggest mistakes that organizations are making nowadays, because what is happening is the CEO is reading the newspaper or hearing from their neighbor's kid about all these amazing things that will happen when they deploy AI in their organization. And so suddenly they're holding a all hands meeting and saying, we are becoming an AI first organization. And meanwhile, the CISO is crying in the corner in a fetal position. There's no planning that happens. And so as part of the planning, you've got to go all the way back to the basics, to the foundations, before you get all excited about Claude Code or Codex and running those large bills and invoices. Go back to the beginning and figure out the plan. So Jonah may need more tokens, right, than somebody in marketing. Figure that out before you let everybody loose and doing whatever they want. And there are some organizations that if you do show a high level of maturity as an employee, and usage, and you understand how to use AI, and you're seeing ROI from it, which is the key, and very difficult to accomplish, then they are giving them free rein on using AI for whatever they need. But to blanketly give out access to everyone equally is a huge mistake. And it needs to be properly accounted and planned for from the very beginning before getting all excited about this shiny new toy.
Yeah, Olivia, I might need more tokens than some other people, but I'm very happy to cap it at like $100 million a month. I think it's good for me.
I think that sounds reasonable, Jonah. I mean, that's less than 500 million. That sounds fair.
Yeah. I think 500 million, I wanted some stake in the company at that stage.
Yeah.
In the right direction there. Yeah.
Maybe at 500 million, you can get a stake in
ROI of over $1 million. Then the maths, right? The math works out. But most cases, you're not going to see that.
Jonah, since you said stake in a company, I mean, rumor has it Anthropic's IPOing. So does 500 million token spend get me a stake in Anthropic? I mean, that might be an interesting discussion to have. Completely off topic, but let me bring this back to the plan that you were talking about. I think obviously that makes a ton of sense. Like in episode 1 of this podcast, we had Greg Richardson on, who's another AI expert in the industry. Well, I know you don't like the word expert. He's very knowledgeable in AI, and he talked about having a plan and setting limits and things like that. But from more from a government's perspective, I think what's interesting here, or what's challenging, I'm sure you've seen this, is not just having a plan, but having one that actually keeps pace with the rapidly shifting both AI-driven and threat landscape, right? Rather than just, the industry 10, 20 years, we've been fighting this whole, what I call checkbox compliance. I think I'm not the only person that's ever said that before, but just having compliance for the sake of compliance. So what are your recommendations to organizations? Yes, have a plan, but how do you have a plan that is able to keep pace in this rapidly shifting environment?
Well, to keep up with the threats specifically, I always say, invite the CISO from day one. Yes, the CISO. Okay, nobody tends to like to invite cybersecurity to anything. We all know this, right? Unless you work for a security company, nobody really likes to invite the CISO. But
the only department that's hated more than cybersecurity is legal. So we're number 2 on the people list that you don't want to call.
And that's why legal and cybersecurity tend to be besties. And if you're not, you should be.
Fair enough.
That's what I always say. Because you got to have a common enemy, common front against the enemy. Invite the CISO from day one, because if you don't, there's going to be an incident 100% with this AI usage. Somebody is going to put sensitive information, PII, into, ChatGPT or some other LLM that's not permitted. And then the CISO is going to be brought in, and that's when problems happen. Bring in the CISO from day one. I like to say, invite the CISO to the party, and then the CISO should pack a bag and plan to stay for the rest of their lives. So the CISO should not only be on this AI governance committee, but the CISO should have a seat at the table when decisions are being made. And because the CISO really needs to opine and provide feedback on what the threat landscape is, above and beyond mythos that everybody reads about in the news. And people who aren't security people have no idea what it actually means. And I'll give you a great example of this. I went to this general AI event called Human X, and it was pretty much useless. However, there were a few sessions that were fantastic, which made the whole thing worthwhile. And this was in April. They had the CTO of ServiceNow. They had the CTO of Mercedes-Benz. They had the CISO for AWS, and they had somebody, I can't remember who, CEO for, they had the CISO for Amazon, and they had the CISO for AWS.
So clearly small mom and pop businesses.
He had just a few figures. And the funny thing was, as an aside, they had no security. They weren't checking for guns or anything going into this conference. And I'm like, they could have done something, right? Some crazy person jumping out of the audience. Anyway, the whole point of this is that they had these high-level people. And what I came away from this conference was everyone is completely confused about deploying AI properly at their organization, except for the Fortune 50, who seem to have figured it out. They also had Walmart, the CTO for Walmart present. And all these big players, they started years ago, and they started with a plan, and every single one of them mentioned cybersecurity being in there from day one. None of them brought in cybersecurity halfway through this whole transformation, and they're actually starting to see ROI. Nobody else is. But it demonstrates the importance of bringing in the cybersecurity people at the very beginning. And the interesting thing was that everybody else who presented, how many people actually mentioned the word cybersecurity? I'll tell you.
Yeah. So you're saying that a successful plan really is built on the foundation that security is in the base of it, from an AI program perspective. And I think, ironically, we see that all over technology to begin with, right? We talk about how do we prevent vulnerabilities. In fact, we were talking about, was it last episode, Jonah? We were talking about curl, and we were talking about the software practices that curl has. And due to those practices, they have less vulnerabilities potentially. And it all goes down to integrating cybersecurity at the very basic level, for sure. So I think, as we were joking about, sometimes they're not your best friend and they cause things to be a little bit more difficult in some areas, but having that cybersecurity mindset, what I like to call the think red, act blue mindset, where we all need to think like attackers. The only thing different is what we do about it, right? And that's that acting blue mentality. That's going to really help ensure that you have a successful program. But I know, Jonah, you've been awful quiet, and I know that you have had some interesting questions or thoughts around some areas that you wanted to find out about when it comes to building a successful program for specific things. What are you stewing on over there?
Yeah, well, we were talking earlier about the Instagram attack, which just recently happened over the past couple of days with the LLM chat being able to basically account takeover on people's accounts. Just wondering, so in terms of LLM agents and stuff like that, what are the most damaging kind of impacts you see in realistic scenarios? What can they do when they're connected to production systems or don't have sufficient guardrails in place?
I think it's everything that you can imagine, right? You've got agents being built by organizations in non-production environments, as they should be. And we all know what happens when you move something into a production environment. And so the key is at the very beginning, even before you build in that non-production environment, develop the workflow. Literally create an Excel spreadsheet. It doesn't matter, but look at what systems are you connecting to? Write it down. Who has access? Write it down. What is, for each step of the agentic flow, what is it specifically allowed to do and not allowed to do? And then what are the outcomes? What are the expected outcomes? How are you going to catch when something misbehaves? Or actually, misbehave is the wrong term, because agents do what you tell it to do. They don't misbehave. So
I think maybe their interpretation might change a little bit as it goes along.
Yeah, exactly. So how do you figure that out? How do you find that out? How can you incorporate logs and have them reviewed? Somebody's got to watch the shop, right? And if you don't have answers to any of those elements, you have no business starting to develop agents, especially in a production environment. And that's where we're seeing a lot of these issues and a lot of these failures. It's something like only 23% of organizations out there, according to all these big consultancy surveys and research reports, only 25 or 23% of organizations have actually said that they have deployed agentic AI in any meaningful way. Now, that doesn't mean it's secure, right? And it doesn't mean that it's seeing ROI. They're saying they've deployed it, which means that the vast majority have probably tried and failed, or it's caused an incident, or they haven't tried at all. But you've really got to figure out those workflows, those work plans, and have it in writing and have everybody sign off on it and figure it out. before you start anything like that.
One of the key things you're pointing at there, and I talk about this when I teach product security testing for SANS, and it's this very simple concept of knowledge is power. You can't protect about threats that you don't know exist. And so what you're suggesting is to make sure that you have a well-documented, I know, especially if we have hackers listening, that's like the scariest word on the planet, documentation. But you have to have documentation and a good understanding of what those workflows are, so that way you can put in the appropriate mitigations where they make sense to have a safe and constructive of program.
And that's exactly it. And as Jonah said, if it does veer off the path a little bit, figure out what data it could get to. And one of the biggest problems out there right now, as we all know, is that organizations have no idea what data they have and where it is. Right? When I was CISO at one company, I can't say which one, but a whole Snowflake instance showed up out of the blue after 6 months. That was using former employee access credentials, and nobody had bothered cutting them off. So you really have no idea where anything is, what it is. And if you think you should definitely verify that with one of these data discovery tools and DLP tools that are out there. But you got to be prepared for the unexpected. And that is when the agent doesn't do exactly what it's supposed to do, or it does, and you haven't planned enough for it.
Another question I had as well then. So if somebody came to you and said they've just done a red team exercise against their LLM deployment, what are some things that you would expect to see in the report to believe they've done it properly?
I think this is a good one, right? To give our viewers an idea of what should be reported during a team related to AI. I'm excited to hear the answer to this one.
Well, it's easy. The answer is easy. I expect to see the OWASP top 10 for agentic AI. Test against that. OWASP is the gold standard, right? They came out with the agent, right? It's simple. I expect to see the agentic AI version that they came out with. Prompt injection. I expect to see that. I expect to see. I don't think hallucinations is in that top 10 for OWASP, but hallucinations. I expect to see any data that they can get to. I want you to really look at if somebody, and I bring up marketing again, but let's say marketing, somebody in marketing is using an approved LLM, but is putting all kinds of data in there. We need to figure that out. And if we can't figure that out ourselves, we need to put in tools that can do that for us. And there are so many incredible AI governance platforms out there now. The market has just exploded. And they're amazing tools to use. Highly recommended.
I think slightly pivoting on that, but I think this is an important topic often, especially to technical viewers, technical minds, and hackers and all, is this idea of data privacy comes up over and over again. And when we're talking about AI, AI governments or AI frameworks and plans, like there's definitely a tension between, okay, our organization needs to review telemetry based on being what's input in these AIs. We need to do DLP protection, that type of thing. And this idea of secure, boundaries for data privacy. Yeah. So what is your thoughts on balancing? Yes, we have to have the appropriate monitoring in place, but we also need to have certain type of data privacy for our employees or customers in some aspects as well.
I can tell you AI is a nightmare for legal, an absolute nightmare. And I don't think many legal teams recognize what a nightmare it already is. The second thing is the EU AI Act is about to hit later this year. And there are heavy penalties for that. And what I see happening is you're going to see organizations crumble one by one. It's going to be an onslaught between October onwards this year. So this is what's interesting about privacy, is that I would probably say most legal organizations are completely unaware of the nightmare that is already happening in regards to privacy in their organizations. Or if they are aware, they're not aware of the impact or the widespreadness, if that's a word, of the violations, especially if they're a global organization. The second nightmare legal professionals are facing with privacy is the EU, sorry, too many vowels, EU AI Act that is hitting this year, where there's going to be huge, substantial penalties for violations. And I think towards the end of this year, we are going to start seeing companies crumble one by one under this new act because it has teeth.
They'll crumble based on violations and fines? Is that what you're suggesting?
You'll start seeing, and when I say crumble, I mean start being put out in the news. You're going to start seeing press releases. That's what I mean. I don't mean crumble as in they're going to fall apart and go out of business. These organizations are not thinking it has teeth. And we have seen with GDPR that these European, regulations do have teeth. The US doesn't have anything right now really comparable. But when it comes to expectation of privacy, I always say, if you are using a company device or network, you have to expect they're going to monitor what you do and they can access it at any time. And what's more, they can use it against you. And this is the interesting thing. I'm not a millennial by far. I'm definitely Gen X. What I see is that Gen X's tend not to use their work computers for personal things. But throughout my career, the younger generations like to merge professional and personal. And so they do tend to use their work computers and not recognize that if they have their iPhone connected to their Mac, those personal text messages can be used against them.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something that I mentor new employees or students coming out of college and all the time is there is, in my opinion, I think it's aligned with what you're saying, is there is no expectation of privacy at your employer. And so like they have that visibility. I mean, mostly no one reads contracts anymore. I'm the weird guy that reads policies before I sign them. But like if you read what you sign when you join a company, you basically sign away your rights to policy to privacy.
That's why I don't read it, Doug.
Exactly.
I don't want to steer all that. I can't do anything about it anyway.
Yeah, I think it's interesting though in the context of AI too, though. When you're putting stuff into an LLM like ChatGPT or something, and how that propagates and how that is leveraged is slightly different. But I mean, yes, I agree with you on the policy side there.
Yeah, absolutely. If you are using a company laptop, it doesn't matter whether you're using an approved LLM or not approved LLM. Whatever you put in there is owned by the company and accessible. And I think people have this misunderstanding as to, like you were saying, Doug, misunderstanding of just how much companies have the right to access what you're doing. You really don't have rights when you're using a company laptop in their network. You really don't. So keep it completely separate. If you want to use ChatGPT and use it as a therapist, by all means do it. That's completely fine. Or have it as your boyfriend. It doesn't matter. But don't use your work computer.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree with that. Separation between personal and work devices are going to, and that's going to be also because we're talking about this in AI context. Like if work gives you an account for Gemini or OpenAI or Anthropic, like that should be different than your personal account for Anthropic, Gemini, or OpenAI, and you should not cross those boundaries just to protect yourself, right? And I think that's an interesting conundrum because you mentioned millenniums. I think it all comes down to convenience. Everybody wants convenience, and so they try to merge everything together. But there is definitely a risk associated with doing that for sure.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and it would just be horrible to be in court having to defend when you mix the two personal and the professional LLMs, it would just be a nightmare. And
as you said, with different acts, with the EU Act and everything, I think we will see that in as time goes on, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. But hey, Jonah, do you have any last questions for our wonderful guest here before we wrap this up?
No, it's been great having you.
Yeah, we really appreciate your time, Olivia, and your insight. We get a lot of technical reverse engineers and different researchers on this. I think this is a refreshing topic that we always allude to a little bit, but we don't actually sit down and talk about. So I've thoroughly enjoyed getting a chance to talk to you about something that you're very knowledgeable in and learning about some of the best ways to do that in there. So once again, thank you for your time. But we'll wrap this up here, and maybe we'll have a chance to have you on again.
Yeah, would love to. Absolutely. May I just add one reminder to everybody?
Absolutely. Go for it.
If you are a leader of an organization, a C-level person, remember that AI is a lot of smoke and mirrors, and it's not all shiny objects. So definitely invite the right people to the right table at the right time, meaning at the very, very, very beginning. And of course, because we're on this podcast, I emphasize bringing in the CISO from the very beginning. It's going to save you a substantial amount of money, pain, problems down the road if you do this.
No, I think that's some very wise advice from someone that has a lot of industry experience being in the CISO position. So you know exactly what that's like. Thank you one more time for joining us and providing us that information. And we'll move on now to the Mitigation Minute. All right, welcome to the Mitigation Minute. And this is where we want to talk about solutions, not just problems. And I think in this episode, one of the most interesting problems that we talked about was the Rapid7 research done by Jonah on GOGS. And the reason I think that's interesting is obviously the research itself is super cool and we love talking about it. But if we take a step back for a second and not think about the specific vulnerability, and we think about what do you do in a context where there is no patch, right? I think the number one thing that we've said on this show and that you read in all security blogs is patch, patch, patch. What happens when there is no patch? And so we're going to dig into that here for a few minutes. And one of the things that becomes paramount when there is no patch is looking to determine if you've been compromised by leveraging IOCs. Now, Jonah, I cut you off a little bit in the Situation Room because I wanted to save that content here. But why don't you bring up those IOCs that you put in the blog and let's just talk about a little bit how you would integrate that into your protection.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So for the IOC section, I mean, there is going to be like a message which will come up in the server log with this git checkout exec exit status. So that's something immediately that defenders can look out for. It's also, if you do this against an existing repo rather than your own one, there's going to be quite a lot more artifacts. So for example, there will be the malicious branch name because that's where we actually put our executions. So that's going to be in the repo's history. If you don't own the repo, you can't delete it. And in the same vein, the PR history, even if you have like an accepted or a closed pull request, they stay in the history. So it's up for an attacker to, once they've got the shell, to go in and start trying to clear some of that stuff up. But if they don't, then there's going to be some stuff here. And also with the Windows as well, we said, right, it has to commit the file to the repo because the payload character is going to cause issues. So look out for the commit history. Although, you know, again, an attacker who has full access as the Git user can go a long way to clean that up. Also, just one final thing there is the Metasploit module creates this GOGS API token, and that is kind of unavoidable. There is no API endpoint to delete that, so you need to go in through the UI or through the database, which again is very easily doable once you are the Git user, but by default, none of that will be cleared up. So these are some things that, you know, defenders can be on the lookout for.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I mean, I'm on the internal red team, so I'm kind of part of the problem at the minute, generating more vulnerabilities for people to try and fix. But I work really closely.
I argue that statement, Jacob, right? Like we have to have these internal red teams to find the problems so that we can fix them. You are definitely part of the solution in my mind.
Absolutely, yeah. But I also work very closely with the blue teams within Rapid7, and we have a whole department of people that are working on threat hunting, and they love seeing these kind of IOCs in blogs. Like this is what they do on a daily basis, is that they'll ingest these IOCs and use their tool suite in order to try and detect if any of the hosts within the infrastructure have been compromised. And it kind of lines up at the minute with an exciting announcement from last week from Rapid7 that the hosted VR API has been released. So this exposes...
for those listeners that probably, you know, abbreviations internal to a company, everything. What's
if you
VR?
say VR, I think vulnerability research.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Exactly.
So the Velociraptor API. Velociraptor is our platform's digital forensics and incident response tool. So it can be used to search throughout any host that has any agent installed on it. It can search for indicators of compromise and do all sorts of exciting, powerful functionality using VQL, which is the Velociraptor query language. And this is a really powerful tool within the platform, but it's got a little bit of a learning curve. But now, so more than ever before, it's very accessible for people to use because you can leverage AI to help you write these rules. You can connect VR up with through MCP with the API, and it's becoming easier than ever to search for these IOCs throughout your network.
Doug,
so I got to ask, right? Anytime you say that there's a tool that's like has a little of a learning curve or more difficult to use, I compare it to two things. Is it harder than to learn how to exit Vim?
I was going to say the same thing there.
Or,
is it harsher than X than Vim? There's just a little bit more to it. It's a query language, so you need to learn how to write and read in the query language, which for some people that's maybe a little bit more effort than they want to put in. But AI can now just translate natural language into that VQL. And I mean, it's never been easier to use. Like,
I was going to say, I don't have to learn it. As long as Claude's learned it, we're good to go, right? Or insert your favorite company.
And it sounds
there.
like a good opportunity for us to get somebody on to show how it works if it's a bit complicated.
I like this idea, Jonah. I'll tell you what, how about in an upcoming episode, I think we can find a VR expert to come on and talk about, hey, like, how would you actually turn these IOCs into something that you can use with Velociraptor? That sounds like a fantastic idea.
Absolutely. And I think at a higher level, this speaks to the fact that, okay, we're at a moment in time where attacker capabilities have maybe exceeded the rate at which we can keep up with them, and vuln queues are growing longer and it's becoming harder for internal teams to manage. But blue teams are going to start catching up soon. We're integrating more and more AI enhanced functionality within the blue teams and development teams, engineering teams. All this patch management is becoming a lot more AI enhanced. So I think we're going to see the blue teams catch up again in the never-ending cat and mouse game.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd almost take a contrary opinion there and say that like threat actors have been ahead for a while, and it's always kind of had that perception, whether AI is there or not. One of the things I like to remind people when I'm out and about is I get a lot of questions, AI related, of course. From the offensive context is sometimes, especially the media, if I'm doing interviews or something like that, I always have to remind them, I said, that both sides are allowed to use AI. Like there's nothing out there that says AI is only for attackers. In fact, there's a lot of cool things that you can do with AI from a defensive perspective that are accelerating defensive capabilities. And we're doing a bunch of them here at Rapid7 as well, and integrating them into our SOC capabilities and integrating into the Velociraptor. So great idea, Jonah. I think we will try to find it won't be that hard. We'll find a Velociraptor expert to come on the show here and talk us through it maybe in the next Mitigation Minute. The last thing I'm going to say on the whole GOGS thing is IOCs are definitely an indicator if you have been compromised, right? But what are something you can do for an unpatched vulnerability that doesn't have a patch? The goal is not to get compromised, not just to find a compromise, right? And I would say a big call out there is if you think about what you had said that we made a little bit of a joke about it in the Situation Room, somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,200, 2,500 exposed GOG servers. If something like this comes out and you have your GOG server on the internet, even if it temporarily hinders your ability to work, take it off of the exposed internet, right? Because that is going to be the number one thing you can reduce your attack surface. Obviously, there's more to it than that, but definitely make sure that you're not exposing something that is known vulnerable with no patch on the open internet.
Yeah, and just a reminder there, Doug, on the patch situation, the nice thing about this is it's an open source GitHub repo, so anybody can essentially produce a patch. I have one. It's there as a pull request. So again, if you are using this and you don't want to wait, because I don't know how long it's going to take for GOGS to accept that, or if they're going to come up with their own. So if you're using it, feel free to go and just get that pull request, patch now.
Absolutely. That's a fantastic reminder. Rapid7 has provided a patch. You just may have to manually apply that within your environment. All right. With that, I think that's a wrap for episode 7. Thanks everybody for listening. Please, if you don't mind, take a minute to like and subscribe both the episode. Leave some comments for us. I think we're going to keep Jacob around for a while. So go ahead, shout out to Jacob in the comments.
He's going to grow a beard so we can swap places.
He's got to grow a beard to join.
Thanks for having me on. Thanks for having me on, guys.
No worries. Nice to have you.
All right. Till next time.